Welcome and thank you for joining me for today's webinar. And here we go. Okay. So today we are going to talk about a very uncommon modality. It's a very new modality in the healing segment. When I say new, this is just gained prominence since the 1970s and onwards. I will talk about the modality in details, but our focus today is looking at transgenerational trauma that comes through generations. It is just like how we get certain physical characteristics from our ancestors. Sometimes we have diseases that come across generations, the color of our skin, the color of our eyes. All of this comes through to us from one generation to another. Similarly, we're looking at what we carry as what we call as blocks, patterns, entanglements, and how this can also be just not what we experience in life. It could also be related to what our ancestors, when I say ancestors, just not our parents, our grandparents, not only our great-grandparents, but ancestors we don't even probably know of. Like we don't know their names, probably we don't have their photos with us as the family tree expands. But is it a myth that we are still connected to them? Is it a truth that we can actually represent and carry traumas that we in our generation we haven't experienced, but somebody up the line has experienced, and we are still carrying an imprint of that? It's very, very interesting line of work, a very modern line of work. So let's dive right into it. And I think there is a lag between. Now it's working. Great. So I know some of you I know in person, my students who've come back and who are attending the webinar. So especially for those students, what we learned in class in hypnotherapy and mind sciences, please keep that aside, because the modality we're going to talk about is just upside down of any of the mind sciences. So it's going to be very interesting to see how, once you know about this and of course what we have done in our hypnotherapy class, it's like we can compare that later. But there are also a lot of people whom probably I haven't met face to face. So I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Arpita, and I'm a holistic therapist at Illuminations in the JLT branch. I practice various modalities, starting from clinical hypnotherapy to transpersonal regression therapy. I work a lot with children, so I do metaphor therapy, I do counseling, play therapy, and I'm also, today I'm here with you, not to represent any of these modalities, but another very, very unique modality called Family Constellations, and that's what we're going to be talking about. I am also into corporate training, so I bridge the gap. When I say bridge the gap, and that's because my first innings of my life was in the corporate sector. After my MBA, I've worked in the corporate sector for more than 15 years, and then I transitioned into my second innings, what I'm doing right now as a holistic therapist. So I do work a lot with corporates, working on programs with respect to all that I mentioned. And I'm also a teacher of integrated clinical hypnotherapy. I am from India. I've lived here in Dubai close to 14 years now. I'm married. I live with my family here. I have two beautiful children. And yeah, that's about me. And then we go straight into transgenerational trauma. So what I plan to do is talk a little bit about the concept of what is transgeneration, which means we have two words here, trans and the generational part. What does that mean? And then move on to talking about how, and first and foremost, what is family constellations and why and how can we use this modality to heal something which is completely unknown. So the difference again with mind sciences and this modality is that in mind sciences, we are more or less, we have a very clear focus on this is the problem and this needs to be healed. Here it is just the other way around. We are going to work with the unknown when we work with systemic or family constellations. Now, when we talk of transgenerational trauma, we are here very simply put. I've tried to simplify it as much as I can. We're talking about the transference of any kind of emotional, physical, or social pain that can be transmitted from one person down to their descendants. So it is very easy for us to, acknowledge and understand, and we don't make a big fuss about it when we say that, okay, my nose looks exactly like my great grandmother's nose. And what is the surprise element then? Nothing. I am a descendant of this family. I carry my great grandmother's genes. So it is very natural for me to have physical features. My nose can exactly look like my great grandmother's. But in the same breath, if I say that my great grandmother is a survivor of the Holocaust in Germany, and I may carry imprints of that trauma of the Holocaust in my genes, then we start to question it and say, really, is that even possible? Or if we say that, oh, cholesterol runs in my family, everybody, like down to my father, to my grandfather, everybody from my father's side of the family has cholesterol. So I may have a tendency to have cholesterol. Again, no questions asked. But again, at the moment we say that, oh, anxiety runs in my family, depression runs in my family, then it becomes a little difficult for us. We actually start to question and say, is it really true? It is true. It is just not the physical traits that gets passed down to us through our genes, but whatever experience our ancestors have had, whether it is at the level of the physical body, it could be the emotional health, it could be their mental construct, and even the social pain. So, for example, our generation that we are going through COVID and this pandemic, what is happening inside us, the good and the bad, is equally probable that we will pass it down in a coded way down to our generations. That is, in essence, when we say transgenerational, what I'm focusing here, it's just not the physical characteristics. It can also be much more than the physical characteristics. The experiences can be passed down generation to generation. So again, very simplistic way of looking at it is we can look at it under two categories. We can say that when we talk of generational trauma, we are here only focusing on what comes through our DNA. So we are talking about our family. Things as a family constellation facilitator that I see the most common is any kind of abuse. If any generation has experienced, was exposed to any kind of abuse, poverty, death, any crime, murder, suicides, genocides, these information, this is very, very easily accessed by generations which are way down the line. The other way of looking at transgenerational trauma is to look at historical events. So slavery, for example, any kind of natural disaster, tsunamis, volcanoes, pandemics, war, Holocaust, and displacement. Displacement is a byproduct of a war where people are refugees and they've had to move from one place to another. Again, the displacement factor is follows the others. Like because of another reason, family got displaced or people have to move. Now, we just don't look at the unit of the family, but we are also looking at the environmental factor here. And that is where epigenetics, and for those of you who are interested, I may, by the end of the webinar, I can give you some readings if this interests you, that we have moved beyond in the field of biology and science, that we are just we have just evolved from apes, and we are humans, and whatever is coded in will be expressed by our genes. The new science of developmental biology, the new science of epigenetics is now talking about just not what is coded in our genes, but also what our ancestors or what we experience in our environment can equally impact the expression of certain genes in our bodies. So when we talk of the scientists have been able to code part of the DNA, and That roughly we say it's around 3%. And then there is another part of the DNA code which we say as the junk DNA. Now we are slowly starting to decode that. It's not junk in the sense it has no use. It definitely has use. It just probably we haven't been able to decode it completely. And that's the unknown. That is something that we can look at through this modality of family constellations. Now, every time I do a webinar on this or a seminar or any academic talk on this, let me be very honest, I struggle, because this is one modality that needs to be experienced. And right at the beginning, let me tell you, if you haven't, then it's a must do. It's at least once in your lifetime, you should be signing up for family constellation. So wherever you are, whichever part of the world, just find somebody who's a family constellation facilitator, because it is really a life-changing experience. Now let's look at what is family constellations and why I say it is life-changing, and it is a completely experiential modality. But I will try my best to talk you through the genesis of it and how it happens in a workshop or on a one-on-one session. Now, if you think of the word constellation, the first thing that comes to our mind is stars, right? When we look up into the night sky and I don't know if we still do it, but when I was a kid, my grandfather would make me look at the constellations and say, okay, this is Orion and this is this. And what is important here is the word constellation means a structure. So the stars in the sky, they have a fixed structure. And though the universe is moving at any given point of time, but the constellation, if you look at the constellation from a different angle, it may look different, but the constellation remains the same. So this modality looks at a setup, looks at a system, and family is only one of those systems. So number one, this modality is an extremely experiential modality, which I'll explain when I come to how we do the workshops. Second thing that makes it very unique is this modality is a very solution focused modality compared to, say, other mind science modalities where we start with the problem. We are focusing on what is going wrong, and then we move towards a solution. The whole concept of this modality is to accept, actually not change anything, actually not try to make any shifts, but look at from a very outside, look into the system and try and see what, because the solution exists in the system. And if we are able to zoom into it, we are able to then get to that solution that already exists. So we don't have to create another solution for us. And it is an energetic intervention. When we say it is not an energy science like Reiki or Theta or pranic healing, and I'll explain how, but it is energetic. It is a modality in which we are stepping into certain roles and we are channeling that energy. How do we do that? We use our bodies. We use our physical bodies and we use body sensing to tap into the hidden dynamics of a system, and the system could be someone's family, the system could be relational, or we can even look at the system through. So when we say it could be family constellations, which means we are working purely on the ancestral lineage. We could be working on any other issues which are in relation to that system, or we could even be working on elements like money, abundance, any of this which may or may not have its origin in just the family. It could be in the country of origin, that could be coming from a religious belief, that could be coming from the community we believe in. So I will give examples of each one of them as we go forward. As I mentioned, unique modality, very, very different. What makes it absolutely unique is when we set up a constellation, the only person who doesn't participate in it is you. So as a client, when you come for this, you are not going to participate in it. You are going to be a bystander. You will actually be a little away from the matrix. And that keeps away any kind of conscious or unconscious biases that we may bring into the healing space. in every other modality, you are very much part of it. Hence, it is possible in this modality to do healing even without the presence of someone. So, family constellations can be done without the person physically being present there. Of course, we need full consent of that person, but and it could be done even for children with consent from their parents. I mentioned it's a solution focused modality. This modality is not focused on the mind. So unlike cognitive behavioral therapy where we are focusing on the conscious mind, unlike hypnotherapy where we are focusing on the subconscious mind, here we say this is a movement at the level of the soul. And the soul has the information of what needs to shift, what needs to move for us to move forward in life. So it is none of the usual energy sciences. It is neither one of the mind sciences, but this is looking at the information that is contained and the movement of our souls. Considerably new modality only in the 1970s and onwards. This has become come into play and it's become, of course, really very famous. Unlike psychoanalysis, hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, which is there with us for hundreds of years now. And this is one modality. There are other ways of doing ancestral healing as well, but this is one of the most frequently used and most effective modalities of dealing with any kind of trauma from the past, memories, exclusions, and incidents. Now, a very little brief about Bert Hellinger, the genius mind who created this line of work. So if you're interested, you could Google Bert Hellinger, German psychotherapist. He just passed away a couple of years back. And he's from Germany, he's a psychotherapist. So this modality is actually born out of psychotherapy in that way, you can call it. Born in Germany during the World War, he went to South Africa. He lived there. He worked there as a headmaster in a school. He was a counselor. He worked a lot with families, and particularly he observed during his stay in South Africa. He was working very closely and observing the Zulu tribe, and many of the tenets of this modality comes from there. And he looked at, when he did his work with families, his idea was through observation. So this entire modality is based on hypothesis, testing of a hypothesis, and checking constantly whether it works or not. So there is no rule books. When he started to work with families, organizations, communities, countries, you can look at anything that is what we call as a system, which means there are people that form a group. And when he observed them, he came out with certain principles of this modality, which he would test in real life. When that hypothesis would work, then he would move on to the same level. So this entire modality, the curriculum, if you want to call it, the way this has been built is very unique because it is just based on observation. Let me define the word system, because we're going to be using this, whether it's a family system or an organization. And on that note, this is also used in problem solving with organizations. I mean, in the corporate sector, this is one of the most fantastic modalities you can use in terms of conflict resolution, solution finding. The only thing that replaces there is we're not working on individual members' families, but we are looking at the corporate world. We're looking at a organization as a group, as a family, but the same principles absolutely work in that sense as well. So when we say system, in this context, we are defining system as an energy field that connects the members and holds them together. So for example, all of you are here on this webinar with me. This is a system. It's a temporary system, probably for an hour. We are connected to each other. We are energetically connected at the moment, though we are sitting probably kilometers apart from each other. Yet we belong. We belong to this system. When the webinar ends, we finish this system doesn't exist anymore. And we go back to our own systems, to our families, to our friends, and those are the other systems. But this system and this information exists, right? And this is the connection that we will make when I describe how we work in family constellations. And this is the most intriguing part when we say we work on information that is available in something that we call as the knowing field. For anybody who is very fascinated with this line of work, you could look up Rupert Sheldrake, and he used the term morphogenetic field, which in a sense means that there is an invisible field of energy which is all around us, connecting families, ancestors, organization members, the entire natural world around us. So the field is all around us. It doesn't need to be created in a physical sense. So for example, if we are connecting through Zoom, we are connected, but we are not physically present in front of each other. And Rupert Sheldrake and his experiments, his observations prove that this field in itself contains information. If we are able to step into this field, and there are certain, not rules, but certain things that we adhere to when we step into the field, we are all equally capable of channeling or receiving that information. And how do we do this? This is the technique that we use. The technique that Bert Hellinger used is what we call as phenomenology, which means we observe a phenomena, we step into it, and we access that information. Now, the beauty of this line of work compared to any other modality is here we declare right in the beginning that we do not know. No preconceived notions, no thoughts, nothing at all. And that is the reason why client himself or herself does not participate in this. Who participates are people in the workshop who have no idea about the client or his personal life. So the first thing is we start by emptying ourselves and by claiming that we don't know. This is the science of not knowing, the healing modality of not knowing. And when we don't know, the only thing we can do is look at what do I experience now. So it is a study of what I subjectively now experience now that I am into this zone. And when we step into this healing modality, these are the three pillars we start with. There is no intention. So when I step into this modality as a facilitator or as a representative for someone, there is no intention in my mind because I don't even know what I'm going to work on. So there is no intention to heal, to not to heal, zero. Second thing, there is no fear, including the fear of death, because here we are talking in a timeline where it is beyond life and death. We are talking of ancestors who have lived before, they're not alive. We are talking of future generations. So time seems to become very fluid here. And we don't carry any of our perceptions with us. We go completely blank. Absolutely opposite to any other modality where there is a big case receiving. We do a case receiving here as well, but very, very brief. There is no plan. There is, for example, if I'm working with hypnotherapy, then I know there are XYZ techniques that I can use. In family constellation, turn it on its head, it's the opposite. There is no plan. There cannot be a plan. When we drop the plan, the matrix will show us what it needs to show. Now, coming back to how we do this, and before that, just one more slide on the principles that Bert Hellinger has given us to work with. I will explain each of it with examples. As I said, if there are any questions, if I'm going too fast or slow, then please put a message on the chat and I will respond to that. Bert Hellinger believed and practiced that the first principle that comes to us in this modality is in any system, whether it's a family, whether it's an organization, whether it's a community, is the need to belong, which means each one of us belong to one family or other, one system or other. From the moment we are conceived and we are in our mother's womb, we are already in that belonging state. Now, when I say belonging, I am not talking here about how well I relate to my family or not. I may have a wonderful relationship with my mom and dad, and then I say I belong, or I may have a very rough relationship with my mom and dad, and I say I don't want to belong to the family. That's not what we are talking about. We are here talking about that the fact that each one of us are alive, breathing, which means we have been born. This means before us, there was a system and we have become part of that system. So each one of us mandatorily belong to a system. And that system is bigger than us. Even there are things that we cannot alter. And one of that is our identity in where we belong. Now, for example, I belong to one family. Now, whether I enjoy belonging to that family or I don't is a different issue. But the fact still remains that I was born to certain parents and to a certain family. And whether I accept it or not, it doesn't change the family system. Similarly, if my country is, I'm from India, so if my country is India, I may love India or I may be very uncomfortable with India, but my loving or not loving India doesn't change India. These systems are bigger than who we are. It is like the laws of physics. Like there is gravity on Earth. I cannot see gravity, I feel gravity. And whether I believe it or not, there is gravity, and that is what keeps me on Earth, and I'm not floating in space. When I also talk about belonging, it doesn't matter whether somebody is dead or alive. Belonging means each member of the family, each member of the system belongs equally. So from the concept and from the focus point of family constellations, aborted children, miscarriages, loss of children for any family, murders, suicides, it doesn't matter. So say for example, there's a family where we say there's mom, dad, and there are two children. We would generally cognitively call them a family of four. But if this family has had, say, two miscarriages or one abortion before the two kids were born, then this family becomes a family of 5, 6, or 7. Just because those children were not born, it's not that we say they're not there, they're still there. And that is the difference between how we look at it cognitively and how we look at it from the perspective of belonging in family constellations. This is a modality which is based on the principle of inclusion versus exclusion. And there is no space for exclusion. We have to bring back, in order for us to achieve what we want to, overcome our entanglements, we look at the system as the whole. So that's number one. Everybody belongs to some system, some family. And number two, everybody belongs equally, whether someone is dead or someone is alive. The second rule is there is always an order, there is always an hierarchy, which means, again, this is a given fact, and we can love it, we can hate it, but we can't change it. Grandparents are bigger than parents, parents are bigger than children, and children are smaller than the rest. So it's like the organizational chart, and this is how our family trees are. As much as we would want to change it sometimes, it's a given. When these rules, when the rule of belonging, when the rule of order or hierarchy, these are fulfilled, that is when there is harmony. That is when we say there are no problems. When, for whatever reason, these are broken, that's when we start to feel there is either something missing, there's an entanglement, and once I finish the third principle, I'll give you examples of each one of them. The third and the last principle is the need for balance, which means whenever we belong to a system, like look at your office system, your organization, there's a need to balance. You give something and you receive something. I go to work and I get paid. The same thing applies to any other system. A system is in balance when there is a proper give and take. And when I say proper give and take, the positive way of putting that would be I give you a little and you give me little more. When you give me little more, I give you little more. And that's how a healthy system builds up. The entire modality is just based on this much of theory. There is nothing else apart from it. So let me give you examples now to explain how we work on it. Generally, what will happen is somebody will always come with an issue, will say, like, I have issues with money, for example, and this is transgenerational. My father never had money, and my grandfather never had money, and this just seems to continue as a curse in my family. Or someone would say, I can never get ahead in life. I'm always falling down. I'm like in the race of life, I'm just nowhere. People who could come with physical ailments, it could be with stress, it could be with relationship issues. So what we call as blocks and patterns, in the language of this modality, we call it entanglement, which means probably I'm entangled with something or someone from past, transgenerational, that I'm still carrying in me, and something in the environment has now caused it to rise up in my system. What are these entanglements? So any of these questions, if you have in mind, if you're going through that phase, or are and these are just, this is not an exhaustive list, these are just I've put down certain questions which I see mostly as entanglements in my work as a facilitator. So if there are painful family situations, if there's a difficulty to attract money, if there are relationship issues, I'm attracting the same kind of partners. There's a pattern of, I gain a lot and then I blow up everything that I have made in my life. I find it difficult to attract love, any of these. Coming back to entanglements, and let me give you now examples of how entanglements work, or how, coming back to these three laws. A typical example, I'm quoting examples from my workshops that I do, from the clients that I see. For example, someone comes and says that it's been a while that, say it's a couple, and they'll come and say, there's nothing wrong in our lives, but it's been a while that our communication has gone bad, and the relationship, our marriage is just going unwinding down the line, and we don't have any reason for it. Generally, these would be people who come for, say, for example, couple counseling. Now, when I'm doing that, and we can put this in the field, and the next thing I'm going to talk about is how this actually happens. So when we constellate, when we put this in the field, it may show that there has been a miscarriage, say, for example, in the family. Now, because the couple doesn't have any children, they will say, oh, we are just the two of us, we don't have any children. But what has gone completely missing is that one miscarried child. So consciously we say that, okay, we don't have anybody else in the family, just the two of us, we are trying to conceive and probably we'll have a family. But the fact remains that this couple, they're already a parent. They're parent to a child who was not born. And many a times when this goes unconsciously hidden or not spoken about, because nobody wants to talk about these kind of things, it's a trauma. That's when issues start to crop up, say, for example, in this case, for the couple. Many a times, the entanglement is not in this generation. So it could be there is a lost twin of my great-grandmother, and nobody knows about it because of the phenomena, what we call as vanishing twins. So 1 out of 3 pregnancies many times start with multiple eggs, ovas. And in the due course, the other ones don't make it, and the baby is a singleton baby, which means not even the parents sometimes know that they were pregnant with more than one baby. But the soul knows, and that information remains in the family system. So if there has been any missing baby, for example, I've seen this from one of my clients, entanglement with the missing twin of a great-grandmother. When that is acknowledged, the system comes back into balance. Look at the system like a chandelier. Like, how does a chandelier look? The chandelier has different layers, and each layer of the chandelier has cups or holders where the bulbs or the candles can be put. Now imagine if 1 or 2 of those holders are taken away. What is going to happen is the system, the chandelier, is going to tilt on one side. This is what we call entanglements. And we do not know from which generation What kind of exclusion has happened? Has somebody been murdered? Has somebody died? Has somebody gone missing? Has somebody been excluded? And we do not know because we can't know. Sometimes these stories are not even passed down from one generation to another. Sometimes these stories are so painful that nobody wants to talk about it. And the more we want to hide it consciously, the more it blasts out unconsciously. And somebody, and that somebody is the forward generations, the younger generations, somebody, a child of the family, is the one who will very unconsciously pick up that entanglement. When I say entanglement, they will pick up that excluded person and will want to bring that back into the reality, as if I have forgotten something or my whole family has forgotten someone, and I take the responsibility as the child of this family to bring back the presence of my great grandmom's twin. I know it sounds completely bizarre, but this is how it happens. This is called unconscious love and loyalty towards our system, people who are alive, and even people who are not alive. How do I explain the need of order? I'll say a client has come and says, though I am ready and I want to start a family, I want to be in a happy relationship, I just don't find the right woman in my life. Now, when we constellated, it showed that for this client, his father passed away very early on in life when he was a kid. And very unconsciously, he has taken up that role, which means he's become father's father, which means I am now going to take a position higher than my hierarchy level. So, as a child of this family, what I have done out of pure love and loyalty, I have crossed the boundary of this need for order. And I do it out of love. I do it because I love my system and my family. But the result is, when I take up that position, I have no consciousness left to look and live my life the way I want to. There is no space left for this beautiful partner of mine to come in. When that is resolved, when we give back the position of the deceased father to him, we accept us that we are children and our position is one rung below. Whatever this unconscious reason is why I don't find a partner, that goes away. I can give you many other examples because these are all real life examples. Basically, we are talking of issues that you think you have worked on, issues where you've worked with other modalities, and yet things have not shifted for you. If that is where you are, then this probably comes from an unknown zone, probably comes from a system that you belong to, but from people you have no idea how this has come. Let me think of some other examples. Yeah, for example, diseases that come through, addictions that come through, all of these could ultimately lead to finding out what has gone missing in my system as a community, in my system as a family. I won't keep you waiting. I will dive straight into explaining first how this works, because till now I know it is like it's bizarre. It can work in two ways. The most delightful way of working with family constellations is in a group. So if you haven't attended any, as I said in the beginning, please find wherever you are, find somebody you trust and work with it. It is absolutely life-changing. Now, how do we work? Say there is a group, when I'm working with a group and I'm doing a workshop, there will be 10 people. So imagine we are in a room which has 10 people. We are in a circle, and these 10 people will come with their 10 different issues. Now, bear in mind, they are all strangers. They do not know each other. So I would invite one of them to come, and they would then share what, say person A comes, and I talk to person A and say, what is it that you want to work on today? Now, there are two ways of doing it again. You could be talking about your issue in front of the other 9 people, or we could go out and you could privately talk to me and say, okay. And I'll give you an example. Say person A says that I want to work with my money issues. So every time I try to earn money, it doesn't come to me. So between me and money, there is a big block, and I have tried XYZ things, nothing works for me, hence I'm here today. So that is the only thing that I need from my client. So of course, I will have a little bit of a fact finding. When I say fact finding, the case taking in this modality is only facts. We do not get into stories. I may ask a little about his family, who all are there, etc. Now, the only thing that needs for my client to do is to now, between me and my client, we will agree and we say, okay, in order to solve this problem, let's pick up three elements. Element number one is you, which is my client. Element number two is money, which is what you want to work on. And element number three is question mark, block, whatever we want to call it, the reason why you cannot enjoy money or you cannot earn money. And now I would request my client to now go and select three people, three strangers who are also sitting there, one as himself, one as his money, and one as his block. So he will bring these three people up, and in the room, which we call as the matrix, the open room, we will request client to just guide these three people and place them anywhere in the room. And that's where the role of my client ends. That's what I mean, that in this modality, there is no interference of the conscious, subconscious, any mind of this client. He will now sit at some place where he can very easily see what will happen. This is the initial placement. Now, these people have stepped into certain roles, which, if you remember what we discussed earlier, they have no prior information, so there is no perception, there is no fear because we don't know what we are dealing with here, and there is just emptiness. When they stand in those positions where my client will place them, these people will be able to channel the energy of these elements. Now, these could just be elements, or these could later turn out to be members or missing dynamics of the family. From there on, they will move, and of course, I, as a facilitator, I will guide them. There are sentences sometimes we say. So first, the diagnostic part is done. The diagnostic gives an inner image of what the problem is, and then we allow them to follow their body, the physical sensations in their body, and sometimes I will introduce additional elements like resources, or if there is something still missing. And ultimately, the flow of this energy, the introduction of other elements, the truth statements, all of them will finally take a final position. Like, it will become like another, another constellation. Like, they start with one placement and they will, in the end, show the resolution. Now, client is watching from outside, and hence there is no contamination of any biases, any belief systems, any emotions into the system. Each person can channel. You don't have to be special to step in there. Each one of us are equally gifted to do it. What these people are doing, they are representatives. They are not role playing. They don't have scripts. They will just go with how their body feels. They will move. They will come close to some people. They will move away from some people. They will say something. And of course, as a facilitator, I'm also constantly checking with my client if what is making sense. Whatever needs to be seen, whatever has been excluded, will show up in the final resolution picture. This is how we do it in a group, which is absolutely fantastic. But the same thing can also be done on a one-on-one consultation. But the only difference is, when we do one-on-one, we are using either dolls or figurines, bottles, paper, pillows, chairs, and we don't have the luxury of other people channeling for us. So as a facilitator, I would channel, and as a client, you would channel. And finally, the result is the same. So whether you choose to do it one-on-one, whether you choose to do it in a workshop, the ultimate result of whatever is your issue will show up. The difference is not in the result, but yes, the difference is in the experience. Also, why? Because in a workshop, when you're there for the whole day, it is just not your constellation that you'll participate in. You get the opportunity to participate in 9 other constellations And the roles that you will be chosen for, and you will see, they are not random and they are not coincidental. You will be chosen up for roles which are very relevant to your life, to whatever situation you are going through in life, and sometimes even so clear that somebody else will pick you up for a role for what you have come today. Many a times I have had clients, by the end of it, they say, I don't need to do my constellation anymore because from the other 7, 8 constellations, I have already got my answer and where the hidden dynamics lies. That's, I guess, how I could explain this to you academically, because it's a webinar. I cannot demonstrate it, but yes, if this interests you, then you can always get in touch. How do you know this is your modality, and how will you know that? If any of these issues, any issue that you're constantly working on, and you've done many sessions probably, and yet you're not coming to a resolution, then it is worth looking at, is this only your experience, or are you carrying the experience, the imprints of your ancestors, of your systems in your DNA? Then it is definitely worth doing family constellations. What do you need? This is not a space of curiosity of, oh, I'll just go and see. There needs to be urgency to heal. There needs to be a drive which says, I just can't carry on with this anymore. I need this to change. The need for change, the urgency to change is very important. And equally important is the openness to see what the matrix will show you. Because it will definitely show you something that you've not seen before. Because had you seen it, your problem would have been resolved by now. So sometimes, yeah, it is very shocking. Sometimes it is a little difficult to take in, but that openness of your heart, the more open you are to it, though you may not agree with it immediately, will determine how fast the results come. I personally got introduced into this line of work when I was actually a student of hypnotherapy. And I had come with a physical issue that my daughter was suffering, and my daughter had bilateral pneumonia. There were so many issues with her lungs, and medically we did everything we could. There was nothing wrong, but every 3 months I was admitted to the hospital with her because of some life-threatening issue with her lungs. And my first ever constellation in my life was for my daughter, for her lungs. And I'm absolutely grateful to those people who introduced me to this concept, and of course my then facilitator and later my teachers. That the day I did the constellation and till now, touch wood, this completely reversed. We never had to go. So for me, this modality is very, very important because it changed something physical in my daughter. So that's where I say it's one of my favorite modalities. It's profound and it's absolutely magical. Now, I have had no questions from you at all throughout this time. So, and I do understand this is very, very difficult to, talk academically. But as I say, I try my best to explain the principles. I talk a little about Bert Hellinger, and I talk about, what this modality is and how imprints from the generations come into us. I will open it up for any questions that you have now. So you could either use the chat box or you could unmute yourself and ask. So please feel free. I will open the chat box and I'll wait for your questions. If you need more examples, I'm happy to quote, of course, with confidentiality, but I can talk about the various issues that people come up with when they're working in constellations. Okay. Okay, I have the chat box here, and yeah, I'm ready whenever you can unmute yourself, or you could just type in your question in the chat box. Kajal, who are eligible to do this workshop? Anybody is eligible, Tejal. Anyone who is in a balanced state of mind, as we generally say normal, they are able to do it. So if it is an adult, of course, above 18 years of age, anybody could come and do it for any kind of issues that they work with. If it is a child, then it has to be with the consent of the parents. So many a times when I work with families and say there's a small child, is a 5-year-old, and there's an issue to work with the 5-year-old, of course, the mom or the dad can come and work on behalf of the child. So it becomes like surrogate, but yeah, you can work on someone else. Also, say for example, you want to do it for somebody who is not in town or stays somewhere else or is not able to come, you could also work on behalf of someone. But if that someone is an adult, then you need to absolutely have full permission from that client, from that person to work with. So it is eligible for actually everyone. When I worked on my first constellation with my daughter was around 2-3 years old. So yeah, you could work. Is that what you mean when you say who is eligible? Then age-wise, anyone is eligible, and somebody as in the same eligibility for any kind of as long as they're balanced and they're cognitive and they can follow instructions, they can talk. It's for everybody. It is not there's no other eligibility criteria. Maria, can you work remotely on a person? Yes, 100%. You can work remotely on a person. So when you say remotely, I can, when we work one-on-one, I could do it on Zoom. So if the person is somewhere else, we could do the one-on-one constellation like on paper or with figurines. The other way of working remotely is say, I work with people who are sick or who couldn't come. So it works remotely. I've even done in a workshop for someone who was not present there, but you could work remotely, either one-on-one or workshop, both works. Because, we are stepping into the matrix, and when we say the matrix, it is just the system, the space around us. So you could definitely work. Rima says, is it a long day event? It's a full day event, Rima. So we start at 9, we finish at 6. Could we have a couple of examples? Okay. So I had a client who came and said that her presenting issue was, I'm just stuck in life. Life is just not happening for me in every area of my life. So for example, I don't like my job. I'm stuck at my job. I don't have money. I don't have a relationship. So every aspect of my life is on a hold. So when we started to work, so this was a workshop client. So I told her to choose, we chose the elements as my client, we chose life in general, and we chose the block, whatever, because every aspect of her life is blocked. So when you put those people in the matrix, they will start to walk around, they will stick to each other, or they will go away. What the constellation showed is that she had another sibling. She had a twin. And parents even did not know about it. But constellation shows that when her mom was pregnant with her, there was another soul, another baby, another embryo in her womb. And this is again the example of the vanishing twin syndrome, where the other child didn't make it. This happens even before we go for the first 3 months check of when the doctors will check and say the heartbeat is there and so on and so forth. So constellation says there is a twin that went missing. And my client, who is a lady in her 30s now, she is unconsciously following her twin sibling to death. It is almost what we call as the survivor's guilt. So unconsciously, I know, in the depth of my soul, I know that there was another one with me. Now, this another one did not make it. Out of love and loyalty for my unborn twin, how do I compensate and how do I show my love? I will sabotage my life in every aspect of my life. I will follow you as if my life is also lifeless because my twin is lifeless. When that acknowledgement happened, in a few months from there, her life completely changed. When I say acknowledgement, I'm not saying you have to sit and grieve and light a candle for your twin. No. In family constellations, we say you just acknowledge it. You just know in your heart that you're not the only one or you're not the first child. There were two. You made it and someone didn't. When we acknowledge it, the survivor's guilt goes away. And we unconsciously then give ourselves permission to live our life to the fullest. That is one example of the belonging. I had one more. Let me give this example. So this lady came with an issue that she's not unable to find a job for the last 3 years. He says it just doesn't happen. I am unemployed. So we placed her future job, and we placed the hidden reason behind why she's not finding a job. Now, the hidden reason turned out to be some issue with her country of origin. So she is born out of some country, but there is some issue there, and she had to undergo the change in her nationality. So the passport is different now. So say I'm an Indian, but I have changed it, and now I have American citizenship, which means I have moved from one system to another. And as a client, now I am very angry with India, and I have got nothing to do with India, and I'm cursing India because now I want all my. I've got why people do this is because there's very painful memories attached to that country. Maybe there's war, maybe there is slavery, and maybe in their generation, maybe it could be many generations before. So there is a complete exclusion of an identity of being part of one country. And I still remember it was a very difficult one for my client to take in because there's a lot of hurt and pain associated with her country of origin. But when she acknowledged it, it was one of those things I completely remember, that she actually landed up in a job within a week from there. So with constellations, sometimes the results are overnight. You do a constellation and miracle happens overnight. And sometimes it takes months. I've had clients who've come back after even 2 years and said, now my constellation makes sense. It didn't make sense when we did it, but today when I look at it, I understand what happens. So these are examples of when we are out of a system and we are not able to relate to it, or we unconsciously block it. I have had a client who's had issues with authority, with bosses. And when we went into the constellation, it shows that one of the ancestors was murdered during some civil war. And so there is a judgment, there is a position of a judge. The authority judges and is punishing somebody. And this was the great grandfather of somebody who was murdered in a civil war in a country. That imprint has come down, and now every time my client wants to find a job, she's having an issue with her boss, because in her boss, she sees authority, unconsciously reminding of her of a transgenerational trauma of Holocaust, of murder, of anything. So Bhagyam, these are the examples that are coming to my mind at the moment. Maria says, for example, if you see your friend always stressful, how could I help her? Maria, the first question is that, does your friend want to be helped? And I understand where you come from, and I understand your good heart. You could do the constellation on behalf of your friend, but you would need her. Ideally, she should be doing it on her own, but for any physical reason, if she's not able to do it, you could do it on behalf of her, of course, but with her complete permission. So in that case, because we don't, as much as, and this happens with family members as well, when we are introduced to a modality and we want our family members, our friends to benefit for it. But I would humbly ask, please check if that person is ready for this, because healing doesn't happen with force, and the force is also full of love. I understand that, but to answer your question, Maria, 100% you can do it for your friend, but with total consent from her. Bhagyam has a question. What about families with multiple issues or multiple deaths or displacements? Yes, Bhagyam, see, the issue is, it's like, it's a multiple entanglement many times. Now, when you talk of displacements, this could be refugees, this could be deaths during a war. Yeah, we carry it in our genes, and you could and you should work. If you're aware of anything that has happened, you could just very simply set up a family constellations to heal that part, so that, the future generations, they walk free of it. When we work at this level, we work on releasing what we are carrying in our DNAs, then the future generations don't have to carry it. That's the beauty of this modality. Then we resolve it, and this has impact. So time is very fluid in this modality. We are working on the past, healing any imprints that are coming from there, so that we keep our children free from these entanglements. It always comes up, like especially with if there are deaths, and if there are young deaths in the family, if there are murders, if there are suicides, if there are multiple miscarriages, abortions, displacements would be like, refugee situation, or you're forced to or run away from a place. All of this, yes, 100%. Let me know if that answers your question, or if that's what you mean. Okay. Okay, thanks, Bhagyam. Yeah. So yeah, this is about those, untold stories, those hidden facts. So how does it affect us? It affects our generation. It is our parents. It is their siblings. If our parents have had partners before, it also involves that side of the family. If our parents have separated and they have another family now, which is not the biological family that we belong to, previous partners of our parents, grandparents, their previous partners, half sisters, half brothers, step brothers, step sisters. So to give you another example, Bhagyam, inheritance. Sometimes people say there is a property that it doesn't get sold, and I'm trying to sell this property, or my inheritance is stuck for legal battles that are going on. And you could work these issues with family constellations as well, and then you go back to that origin of that property, or the rightful owner of the property, and you realize that. So I'll give an example of my client who said that there is a property that has come down to me now from my father. I want to sell the property, I just can't sell it. And this is bizarre, because it's like 10 years and there's no reason for this property not to be sold. So when we did the constellation, we found out that this property came to her from her father, but it came to her father from his father. So from the grandfather. And in the father's generation, father had another brother who died in a car accident. So when the brother died, the father became the only son who inherited this property. But the fact remains that there was another brother, and should he was alive, this property would have been 50-50. Now you see, in this case, there is no there's no betrayal. The trauma is there. There's somebody who's died in the family, and because of that death, this property is now have been passed down to my client's father, and then to my client. All we had to work on is on acknowledging that uncle who had died. Because if he was alive, this property wouldn't be coming down through this one part of the family. Either they would have sold the property, or it would have been a joint property. So in this case, what went missing was that uncle. And the moment we acknowledge that, you will see movement in real life where this property is then sold, because now we acknowledge that there were two rightful owners of that property. One died, and the death of one person actually resulted in a benefit for somebody else. So it's almost like my loss was your gain. And when you gain out of my loss, then acknowledgement should be there for that. So the moment you acknowledge that, the problem resolves. But most of the time, we don't understand it, not because of anything bad in our hearts. It's just that, yeah, there was another uncle, but he died very young, and the property came to me. It is not. It is not that simple. From the family perspective, the positions are still there, though the person is not alive anymore. It is karmic in any way. You can look at it as that, in the sense, it's, see, karma is not like punishment. Karma is not you did something wrong. You can say karmic bhagyam if you understand, if you're saying that karma is a balance. I'm here talking about balance. I'm here talking about acknowledgement. So of course the property has come to me, and which is fine. But I need to acknowledge that that tragic loss of my uncle has played a part of that property to come to me. The moment you acknowledge it, that then in your words, if that's what you mean by karma, then you are unwinding that karma. Then you are paying your respects, acknowledging it, and carrying that person in your heart. Then you are not entangled anymore with that uncle. Otherwise, you can be, and you will never be able to sell the property, because unconsciously you feel guilty about it. It was supposed to be his property as well. Manya, I believe you have a workshop coming up. What will happen during the workshop, and how many participants for it? Yes, I do have a workshop. Hold on, please. I do have a workshop coming up. I do workshops every month. I have done one in the beginning of the month. This month happens to be one where I'm doing two. So the next workshop is on the 26th of June. 10 people. I do not take more than 10 because it takes time to do each constellation. Also because, you know, in constellations, you can never say, I will finish it in 15 minutes. Sometimes it can take up to an hour sometimes. So to answer first part of your question, constellation workshop for me, maximum 10 people. And it's generally 10 people. I may not be, I may be wrong, but I think this is almost full. So if you're interested, then just contact Illuminations. So what did you ask? What will happen during the workshop and how many participants? It is completely practical, Manya. There is no theory. Of course, I will take 5 minutes to explain how we were going to work through it, but it is an absolute 100% practical workshop where there will be 10 people. As a participant, you will come up, and as I said, you can talk to me there, or you could talk to me outside in private. We discuss about what is the issue that you want to work, and we select the elements. So for example, if you're working with same thing, for example, property, I'm giving a random example, then we choose you, we choose your property, and we choose the problem. Now, and then you will choose randomly amongst those other 9 people, 3 people to represent your elements, and you will place them anywhere in the room. And then you just go and sit. You watch, following the principles of the workshop. I will assist these people, but they are going to assist me more in channeling, and they will tell me what they feel, what positions are correct. And finally, the hidden issue, what is not letting you resolve your, whatever your presenting problem is, it will show as the resolution. And that is the last thing that you carry back. Sometimes I can give certain exercises, or I will say some certain things to do, but that's very small. It's a complete practical workshop. Also, remember, you will participate in 9 other constellations of these other people, and you will play part in those people's constellation, which you will see are very, very relevant to your own life. So end of the day, when you go home at 6 o'clock, you have participated in 10 constellations. Let me know if that's what you meant. That's how I read your question. It is practical, and that's what happens during the workshop. Bhagyam, understand completely. Maria, what are the charges for the workshop? It is, wait, it's here. It's AED 599 plus VAT. I think Illuminations gives some discounts if you book like early bird, but I'm not the right person. So the best thing to do is to call Illuminations and check, and they'll help you through it. Tejal, what about consultation online to sort the issue, to find the hidden issue? Yes, you could book a session online as well. And the only difference is that you're not face to face with me. So in an online constellation, we have to use props. So we use small dolls or figurines or bottles. It will happen in the same way. The only thing is that it's you and me who are going to channel. We will not have the luxury of other people doing it for us, but it works equally well. Your results will still be the same. Your issues will show up. Yeah, but if you're first time in getting introduced to this stage, my suggestion, my recommendation is you try a workshop. But having said that, if you want to do it one-on-one online, that is also possible. I work with clients around the world, and of course, at the given moment, it is a lot of online work. Manya, thank you. Sounds very interesting. Perhaps I'll see you there. Yes, of course. You're more than welcome, Manya. And it is magical. It is so interesting. And as I say, when you experience it, let's talk after the workshop. You'll see it. I cannot explain certain things in words, and it's only when you're there you will sense that healing. You will feel it, and it's a profoundly moving experience. So. Yep, I look forward to seeing you there, Manya. Yes, thank you. Bhagyam says thank you. Okay, so I don't have any other questions. So I'm going to be here for the next maybe 4-5 minutes more. We have exceeded time, but yeah, when we are discussing, and I prefer answering your questions because that's how you understand it better. So if there are any other questions, please tell me. I'm around here. If there are no other questions, then I will thank you for being here. And okay, there's questions before I close. So how does one finally acknowledge the issue? We acknowledge by giving, by just acknowledging, Bhagyam. There is no other way to say it. Like, for example, if you find out that your mother had a missing sibling, then in your heart, you know that there could have been another uncle or aunt of yours. And just knowing that is acknowledging. In respecting that and respecting them in their death, that they are no longer there with you, but they hold, remember from the chandelier experience, they still hold a position, and that position should not be forgotten. So acknowledgement means we don't forget people who are dead. We don't forget people who we do not know. Acknowledgement is giving them their rightful space. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything extraordinary. It is like for a mother who has 2 children but has had a miscarriage. Acknowledgement will mean I am mother of 3. I'm not mother of 2 children. I'm mother of 2 children who are alive, and I'm mother of 3 children out of which 1 is not alive. That is called acknowledgement. Carrying that in our hearts and carrying that very gracefully with respect, not with pity, not with saying, oh, poor you, how bad it happened. No. Each one of us can carry our destiny and our fate. So acknowledgement is knowing that, carrying it with grace, carrying it with respect. That's called acknowledging. Of course, in the workshop, there are actually physical ways to hold, to acknowledge, and that when we do the workshop, then we are, of course, doing it so that it's physically registered with the client as well. Because at the end of the day, it's in the DNA, it's in the genetics, it's already there in our bodies. Welcome. Great. So if there are no more questions, if there are questions, I will be still happy. I'm here. I'm going to answer all of that. And if there's no other questions, then thank you so much for joining me today. And have a lovely evening. If you have any other future questions, you can get in touch with me. You can get in touch with, I work exclusively at Illuminations. So you can get in touch with Illuminations, and these are my contact details. If you're interested, then yes, please come and join the workshop on the 26th. If you can't make it this time, then come. You can always come later. I do it once a month, or you could do it with any other facilitator. Yeah, just experience it. It's a beautiful modality to work with. Okay, looks like there are no other questions. My chat box looks quite empty. So then, thank you so much and bye bye. Take care. Have a good evening.